is an example of a real-life evil person that got what they deserved? Story 1. I was waiting at a crosswalk once. The pedestrian sign told me to go. A guy making a right turn sped up to cut in front of me. I had to jump back to avoid getting hit. As the guy passed me, he pointed and laughed at me. It's really a shame that he was staring at me to mock me, because he definitely didn't see the cop waiting to exit the parking lot right next to me that he cut off. Me and the cop both made eye contact before I watched him flip on his lights and promptly pull the guy over. The cop did not look happy. I'm willing to bet that was an expensive ticket. Story 2. A pedophile in my hometown was exposed when he lent out his old camcorder but forgot he had a tape in it. On the tape was a recording of himself undressing and molesting a 1-year-old toddler. He was arrested 2 hours later, and the police found lots of similar content on his computer. He was released pending trial a few weeks later and disappeared. Most people assumed he had fled the country. A few months later, professional divers cleaning up the bottom of the harbor found a car with a corpse in the driver's seat. The windshield was missing and the corpse was tied to the steering wheel with rope. The local police declared it a clear-cut case of suicide. The national police told the local police to investigate the case further, but they didn't manage to uncover any evidence of wrongdoing, and people was very pleased by the good work the police had done. Story 3. Jeff Doucette, Taekwondo instructor raped a student. Said student's dad was in the airport when Doucette was being extradited. Dad hangs by payphones armed with pistol. Cops walk by with Doucette. Dad caps him on the side of his dome. Lights out sugar. Story 4 happened in Daytona Beach about 10 years ago. Guy molested a boy and the boy's father caught him in the act and beat him to death with his bare hands. Story 5. Nazi war criminal Oskar Dirlewanger, who was so evil the Nazis disciplined him for excessive violence during the invasion of Warsaw, got captured in France and was recognized despite his civilian clothes and died a few days later under ill treatment. Story 6. Stalin. He created a climate of, someone else said Gaddafi and Mussolini, who certainly got what was coming to them, but Stalin's death always seemed more fitting. He could have been saved if he had not instilled so much paranoia in those around him. Story 7. Bill Cosby. Not just that the prison time is deserved. His legacy has been destroyed. His work has disappeared from the public. His characters are tainted. His voice has been erased. In 10 years, his eulogies will be about his disgrace, and then his name will never be spoken again. Story 8. Maya Buzdan Slomik. She was the commandant of the women's section at Stara Gradiška, a subcamp within the Jasenovac concentration camp system built by the Ustase, an ultranationalist fascist regime installed in Croatia by Hitler and Mussolini in 1941 after the Nazis conquered Yugoslavia. She shot, stabbed, strangled and tortured women inmates to death. After the war she tried to hide with her husband, who had also been a camp guard at Stara Gradiška in either Zagreb or Slovenia, but a former inmate recognized her and reported them to the Yugoslav secret police, who subsequently arrested them. The trial was fast and so was the execution. Both her and her husband were executed by either firing squad or hanging, accounts differ. Their bodies were buried in secret locations which remain secret to this day, edited to fix multiple errors. Don't get old, kids, it sucks. Story 9. Thomas Midgley, the inventor of leaded gasoline and chlorofluorocarbons, was strangled to death by another of his own inventions. Edit to brag that I spelled chlorofluorocarbons correctly on the first try. I'm impressed with myself. Story 10. My boss, his fiancée left him and took the kids. He lost his job where he was making twice my salary while doing nothing. He had a heart attack from years of cocaine and pill abuse that seemed to set him straight. Health-wise he seems to be okay now and is on a better path. Story 11. I was going straight at a light. The light turned green. I went to start going forward. The guy in the oncoming lane was going to take a left. He sped in front of me to cut me off to take the left first before I could go forward, made eye contact, and waggled his finger like no 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 with a big smile on his face. I could see his lips moving. He thought it was pretty funny, but the cop he rear-ended because he was focused on doing that to me didn't think it was nearly as funny. Story 12. A killer named Tatsuya Ichihashi used plastic surgery to hide his identity while he was wanted for murdering an English teacher named Lindsay Hawker, but ironically, his plastic surgeon was the one who brought him down because he gave him before and after photos and he told the police on him. Story 13. Roy Cohn was a lawyer who was instrumental to McCarthyism and the Lavender Scare, then went on to become extremely rich working as a fixer for the rich and powerful. He worked for Donald Trump in the 1970s, introduced Rupert Murdoch to Ronald Reagan, and was indicted multiple times for crimes like extortion and blackmail. Although nothing ever stuck, there's a very direct line from Cohn to the modern Republican Party. Roy Cohn was also a closeted homosexual, refused to ever admit it despite throwing countless other gay men under the bus, contracted AIDS in 1984, was disbarred in 1986 for trying to make a dying client sign over his estate to Cohn, and died weeks later alone, swearing he was actually dying of liver cancer the whole time. As soon as he died, the IRS took most of his estate because of just how much money he owed them. Story 14. It's not everything that he deserved, but Hitler watched his attempt at conquest fail and backfire before taking a cowardly exit, and now his name is synonymous with evil forever. He deserved much more, but it's a tiny bit of justice that he suffered humiliating failure before he died. Story 15. The dude that was recently executed by firing squad in North Carolina may have been SC not even for the execution of the store clerk he robbed, but for the cellmate he tortured to death. Supposedly only 2 bullets hit him in the lungs and nowhere else, so he drowned in his own blood for a couple minutes. Story 16. Reinhard Heydrich was one of the worst in the SS and was one of the most important figures in the organization and execution of the Holocaust at all of its various stages. He got hit with a grenade by Czech rebels and died slowly over the course of a week from sepsis. Unfortunately, the Nazis killed about 1,000 civilians in response, but that was the Nazis for you. Story 17. My ex was verbally, mentally and emotionally abusive. He terrorized me. Well, he also has diabetes and never took care of himself. He lost sight in one eye, lost 2 toes and his doesn't work, so you tell me who won? Theodore Robert Bundy. He could have gotten worse. But I feel like the death sentence worked pretty fine, considering that was the worst the United States could legally do. Story 18. To an extent. Story 19. Hamza al-Bashani. He was an Egyptian army officer during the President Gamal Abdel Nasser's reign. He was very known for the brutal methods of torture and abuse he would use on the prisoners. I won't go into details. In the end, he died in a mere car accident where his body was pierced by steel bars all over, completely mutilated. There was also a rumor that spread around which stated that his skull was being used as an ashtray in a famous doctor's house. His end and the rumors people spread about him tell you a thing or two about how much of a terrible person he was. Story 20. Sam Bankman-Fried and his crew, leaders of FTX in Alameda, they got stripped of their power, humiliated, and their names are forever tarnished in history. Sam got to watch in real time as all the people he used to be friends with, hang out with and care about turn on him and point their fingers to save their own skin. He also got to watch in real time every single one of his lies becoming dismantled in court. Sam went on a number of podcasts and interviews before his trial, so it looks something like this: prosecutor, have you ever said this or done this? Sam, I don't recall. And never said that. Prosecutor, hey, race video evidence of you saying that. Disgraced, humiliated and jailed. The end of Bankman-Fried and crew. He had an interview with Tucker Carlson recently from jail where he begged Trump for forgiveness and pleaded. He was then put into solitary confinement afterwards. Story 21. Honestly, Pablo Escobar, sure, some of his victims had it worse, but I feel that many families smiled when they saw a supposed owner of an entire illegal market and economy die like a dog. Story 22. Many have heard the story of Helen Hulick, the woman who was jailed for wearing pants to testify in court in 1938, the appeal of which was another stone in the road to equality. But did you know that Judge Guerin, who sentenced her to jail, later appeared on television to argue against the emerging scientific proposition that homosexuality is not a choice, and became so incensed that he died of a stroke on TV? You're welcome. Story 23. The Who screamed at me for pulling off the side of the road to try and get a dog that was running in the middle of the road. I was trying to get the pup off the road and this big dude slowed down just to scream, get out of the road. It's just a dog, mind you. There were at least 3 other cars pulled over with people out trying to help. I believe he screamed at a few of them too. He drove off and we got the dog back to its yard. Thank God the owner came out. I got back into my car and continued on my way. Not even a mile away, I see the same guy in his truck broken down on the side. I just drove right past, absolutely cackling. He got his karma, and the universe gifted me the opportunity to witness it. Story 24. Robert Pickton, a serial killer who fed his victims' body parts to pigs, died in prison. The guy that assaulted him stabbed him first with a toothbrush in the neck, and then he broke a broom handle. Rick Fry told CTV News on Friday, recounting allegations shared by his lawyer. And when you break something like a broom handle, you always get a sharp end, and so he took the sharp end and he stuck it into his nose, up into his skull. Story 25. Charles II the Bad of Navarre was a complete douchebag who turned on his allies 5 or 6 times, arranged assassination of political opponents, opened all the prisons in Paris to create anarchy, and was basically just an overall who everyone hated. He burned to death after being lit on fire while being wrapped in linen soaked in brandy to help cure some ailment. Story 26. 50 years ago at my camp, a counselor molested a camper. Head of camp, the founder's son, was told by the boy, consoled the boy, got up and drove away, pulled up in his pickup to the field that counselor was running an activity in, said get in, drove in silence for hours, deep into the main wilderness logging roads. Hours and countless miles of silence in. Head of camp tells the counselor to get out of the car from the window. He tells the monster the boy told him everything, then he drove away, leaving him in the dark middle of nowhere. No one ever saw or heard from a counselor again. They'll never find him. Story 27. Personal 1. But my uncle by marriage abandoned his wife, my maternal aunt, and kids to go gallivanting around the world with his. Not too long in, and if you think it's harsh to say he deserved it for that, he also gave my aunt Hep C, which caused her to die young and leave their kids orphaned, Lavaniberia. Story 28. We had this racist idiot in my high school who called someone the N-word right to their face. He promptly got his beat by practically everyone within earshot. Some even spat in his face while he lied there bloodied and bruised. Then he was ostracized by most of the school all the way until graduation. Now that racist is a sheriff's deputy, so maybe not the best ending after all. Story 29. None of them that I know of anyway. What an evil person deserves is to be instantly punished after they commit their first evil act, but most go on doing horrible for years before being punished if they ever are. Story 30. I think of Harvey Weinstein. It took way too long, but seeing him finally face consequences gave me a bit of hope that justice can catch up eventually. Still so messed up how many people stayed silent though. Story 31. I feel like I should put a warning, so here it is. Warning. This post involves animal cruelty and death upon both animals and a person. I feel bad for saying this is what they deserve, but in elementary school I knew someone who lived to squeeze animals to death, and I don't mean I knew them as if we were friends, I mean I knew them as in I heard horrific stories about them. Now this person grew up going to the same schools as me, and throughout all of school they were still obsessed with killing animals in the most horrific ways. Recently I had been wondering what happened to them, and I asked a close friend of mine who filled me in that they had been working at a winery and gotten killed by one of the juicing machines or whatever they are called. Quite horrific, but exactly how the animals must have felt. Story 32. The man who molested me and my sister choked to death on his own vomit. Someone else who molested me died of cancer. 2 men who hurt me deeply died of cancer. My mom said she never wanted me and treated me as the scapegoat, had a massive stroke that left her like a toddler. Story 33. Most of the Nazi brass that were hanged after the Nuremberg trials. The executioner that the US Army came up with was a drunken moron that botched most of the hanging, so their necks didn't break and they just suffocated. One of them took 28 minutes. Also, the trapdoor was too small and a few of them banged their heads on the floor on the way down. I don't think it was intentional on the Army's part, it was just one of those things where it was really convenient to have put up in charge. Story 34. I have to word this carefully for privacy reasons. But, a person that was in my life unalived himself. Honestly, it was the best thing he could have done. He destroyed a couple lives before he took his own. A harsh thing to say, but it's true. Story 35. My now ex-friend would abuse me physically, emotionally. I went through it for 10 years. I cut him off and about 2 years later I saw him at my local grocery store. He is now balding, and to try to cover it up, he grew his hair out, which made it look worse, and he also has a beard that looks like he glued pubic hair to it. I am not kidding, I was almost jumping for joy when I saw him. Story 36. Years ago I was driving on THR 241 toll road in California, and it merges into State Highway 91, and I needed to take the first exit. 9-1 was packed and traffic was barely moving. I turned on my signal and moved patiently through 4 lanes while waving to the nice people who let me change lanes. Sitting in a red convertible at the exit was this blonde lady who, no matter how I waved at her, would not let me exit. I lowered my passenger side window to ask her nicely, and she just yelled something to me I couldn't understand. My wife was in the passenger seat, so she started talking to the lady politely, but she would not let us cut in front of her. At that time my lane moved and I followed up, giving up the exit. The lady was still yelling back at my wife, and she matched my movement, except her lane didn't move. The driver in the Bentley in front of her was not happy. Story 37. The guy that raped and killed a little girl named Katie Coleman. He was in jail when her cousin was sent there, and he carved Katie's revenge on the guy's forehead. Another piece of Mel Ignatow, who photographed himself murdering a woman. He was acquitted, and then some time after the photos were found, but nothing could be done because of double jeopardy. He died alone when he had heart attack and fell through his coffee table. Edit. Forgot about Dr. Jeffrey McDonald. Butchered his wife and 2 daughters and found not guilty through military court. After going to talk shows, enjoying his newfound fame, new evidence was discovered and another trial non-military, which is how they got around double jeopardy, finally nailed him and he's in prison for life. Earl Bradley, the pedophile pediatrician in Delaware who raped his patients, including toddlers, he's unlikely to ever get out of prison. Story 38. I think about Jeffrey Epstein. He was a wealthy financier who abused countless young girls over decades, using his power to silence victims. His crimes were horrific, and he evaded justice for years. In 2019, he was finally arrested and faced serious charges. While awaiting trial, he died in his cell, officially ruled a suicide. Many believe it was justice catching up, one way or another. His death ended his ability to harm others, and it exposed a network of enablers. It felt like the world exhaled when he was gone. Story 39. Pretty much every soldier responsible for the Nanjing massacre being found guilty in the Tokyo War trials, the beheading competition trial, is a perfect example. Story 40. A woman on one of my favorite reality shows was molested and raped as a child, and years later her abuser ended up getting hit by a bus right in front of her. Story 41. Leona Helmsley, the Queen of Mean, served prison time house arrest for tax evasion. Her famous quote was, "We don't pay taxes, only the little people pay taxes." Story 42. Oscar Dirlewanger, nicknamed the Butcher Executioner of the Warsaw Uprising, commander of the Dirlewanger Brigade, which was likely the most sadistically brutal group in the entire Waffen-SS. His list of crimes against humanity would make Pol Pot blush. Luckily for the world, he was mysteriously bludgeoned to death by Polish soldiers and former prisoners after he was captured while committing perfidy. The worst Nazi is one evil legacy to leave. If you read his wiki, prepare to be absolutely disgusted. Story 43. The high school bully who broke my wrist over a basketball game. 10 years later, I saw him pumping gas at a 7-Eleven while I was picking up champagne for my promotion. Story 44. Mel Ignatow tied his soon-to-be ex-fiancée to a glass coffee table, assaulted, and killed her. He got off. Even though there was a confession from his accomplice and photographic evidence, the latter was found much later. They were able to slap some perjury charges on him following discovery of the photos, but it wasn't really justice. Until years later, old and miserable and alone in his apartment, he fell onto a glass table and bled out. Story 45. An idiot in a brand new Camaro, V8 and loud, ran a red light. Well, several actually. I was on the sidewalk making my way to the crossing to get to my car when I heard that loud engine, and only saw spewing exhaust as they rocketed past me. So I'm on the road making it to the freeway and a little while passes, when we start all slowing down to a crawl. Eventually we have to merge into one lane to pass around a bend, and that's when I saw all the emergency vehicles surrounding a car smashed to pieces, that same black and yellow Camaro from earlier. There was no way anyone survived that. Story 46. My childhood bully. Throughout my kindergarten and elementary school years, there was this kid named Tyler who bullied me relentlessly. He kept getting into trouble but not enough to actually get him to stop. Then my first elementary school closed down and I had my last 2 years at a different school. At this new school, Tyler threatened to beat me up when we encountered each other in the bathroom. I reported what had happened to a teacher, who promptly got the principal involved. Tyler got into such deep trouble from the principal that he was pulled from regular classes and never said a word to me ever again. He eventually got expelled for some other reason that I don't know about. Last I heard from a friend of mine who was a former friend of his, he got arrested for threatening someone with a knife, never finished high school because he kept getting expelled, and is now an addict. Story 47. I was driving on a road that is well known as a speed trap. I was going the speed limit and there was a car behind me that kept coming up on me, slow down and then speed up on me again. After about 3 times of this aggressive attempt to make me speed up, the cop who was behind him threw on his lights and pulled him over. Story 48. Oscar Groningen. The accountant of Auschwitz. He was 94 when finally convicted for his role in the Holocaust. Took decades, but justice caught up, just before he died. Story 49. Jake Patterson, a criminal in Wisconsin who kidnapped Jamie Kloss, a teenager in Barron County, Wisconsin, for 88 days from October 15, 2018 to January 10, 2019 in Gordon. Up in Douglas County, Wisconsin, Jake Patterson broke into the Kloss home, shot both James' parents dead in the middle of the night, and kidnapped Jamie Kloss. Patterson would hide Kloss under his bed in his cabin in Gordon surrounded by heavy bins, and once hit Jamie Kloss really hard with a curtain rod. Jake Patterson would later be sentenced life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was also registered as an offender. Before the kidnapping, he saw Jamie Kloss get on her school bus, and he knew she was the girl I wanted to take. Story 50. In high school there was this track player who regularly picked on a kid with autism. The kid mom had spent months trying to get the school to investigate, but this dude basically had a scholarship. They tracked down this track star after school, then chased him into an alley where they busted his skull open with a bike chain and had broken his knee with a baseball bat. By the time they could him, the bikers were out of the city and on their way to another state. Story 51. Antonio Cosme, a Spanish rapist. He raped a 13-year-old and spent 7 years in prison. When he was released, he saw his victim's mother and asked her, "How is your daughter?" Laughing at her, the mother said nothing. She just left to go to a gas station to buy some gasoline and some matches. Went to where this man was, poured the gasoline over him and set him on fire. The mother went to prison, but Noon really blamed her for what she did, and many women said he didn't suffer enough. I think she was released on parole in 2017, after 3 years of conviction. Story 52. Oscar Pistorius piece of dodged a murder charge and got a lesser conviction, tried to appeal it and ended up getting charged with murder. Can't believe I had to scroll all the way to the bottom to get Dahmer. Story 53. Jeffrey Epstein, a wealthy financier who exploited underage girls in a trafficking ring. He was arrested in 2019, but died in jail under suspicious circumstances before trial. His exposure led to broader investigations and accountability for others involved. Many saw his arrest as overdue justice. Story 54. Ken McElroy. He was a horrible man who the whole town made disappear. When an investigation was being conducted, the whole town bit their lips. There are tons of YouTubers covering him, documentaries, and at least a movie based on him. Story 55. Lots of shitty leaders got what they deserved. Ceausescu, Mussolini, Gaddafi, Saddam, Tojo and many others all met violent ends. Loads in ancient Rome too. Plenty of emperors were brutally assassinated. Nero, Commodus, and Caligula come to mind. Story 56. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, had a pretty rough time in prison. Despised by pretty much everyone. Brutally attacked several times, including one which blinded him in one eye, then got diabetes and lost most of his sight in the other eye and ended up dying of COVID. Story 57. My dad was a homicide detective in the 70s, and he told me about a case he had where the universe served its comeuppance. A particular perp had raped and murdered a teenage girl and very likely others. Despite significant evidence, there was never a smoking gun, and his counsel was able to get some of the worst bits ousted to the point that the DA declined to prosecute. This went on for a few years, and the perp took to taunting the police. He had a near-constant tail, and he would make comments to the cops about hypothetical crimes. Had mentioned the women in the officers' lives if he knew they existed, winks, finger guns, etc. Dude was a real piece of. Fast forward 8 years or so, and my dad is now an attorney doing civil litigation and criminal defense. He gets a client, a semi-driver who is working through his workers' comp and insurance claims after hitting and killing a motorcyclist through no fault of his own. The perp was on the highway on his motorcycle. This bike also played a role in the murders, I believe, but I don't remember what. He lost control somehow and went right onto the truck. I don't remember specifics, but the general gist was that there was very little of him that wasn't smushed. The truck driver was absolutely distraught over this, of course, and was really struggling with the fact that he killed a person. Partway through the case, The driver called my dad to tell him that something strange had been happening. He had received multiple anonymous deliveries of expensive bottles of scotch and other such things on his doorstep. Apparently, word had gotten out to the police force, and the detectives who worked on the case along with the retired police chief were sending the driver thank you presents for finally eliminating this monster from the planet. Story 58 Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the US, Russia, Syria, Iraq, Iran, France, the UK, Israel, and even the Taliban wanted that scourge gone. An insane amount of countries cooperated to remove him from the face of the earth, and they succeeded. He was ultimately finished by the United States, but it also could not have been without Russia, Iran and Syria. He was chased into a tunnel, whimpering and screaming and crying until US forces finished him off. Story 59 I have 3 a disabled child in the eyes of the law. There was a girl tormenting her in gym class about all her scars. She had 4 open heart surgeries at this time in life and major back surgery. She had this scar on her lip from being vented so much it turns colors when her body temperature changes. She would say Bryn eats worms. My mom just happened to work with this child's mother. My mom as an adult went to her for heart to heart like please talk to your daughter. My granddaughter is struggling hard with her health. She don't need this as well. She pretty much said some kids are flawed. It's not society's fault for having opinions on how they look and on machines walking through a store people are gonna talk. Her daughter is observant and voices her opinion. We can't get mad at kids having opinions now can we? And she left. Our conversation went on to tell co-workers my mom was begging her to have her daughter be my child's friend because she has some disease or something and struggling. My daughter is very beautiful and very brave, never feels sorry for herself. 2 months later our mother was fired for dating a supervisor who was allowing her to go to the gym for 4 hours during work hours and he was clocking her out for a 12-hour shift. Now nobody will hire her. My child lost her life in August a few weeks after turning 17 waiting on a heart transplant. She didn't have just some disease. She struggles every single day in heart failure and trying to go to school. She was always on honor roll all while having surgeries in THR hospital for months at a time, and she still was amazing student. I don't condone the hurting of children, but when her mother lost her good job that girl's materialistic things downgraded and now she's being picked on. Irony, it was not my daughter's fault. She was sick and has battle wounds all over her body. And it's not bully's fault. Her mother was a lying stealing. Story 60 Adolf Hitler, responsible for the Holocaust and World War II, ultimately died by suicide as his empire collapsed, seen by many as a fitting end to his reign of terror. Story 61 Nicolae Ceausescu, Romanian dictator that drove his country into poverty so he could build palaces for him and his wife. When things started going south in 1989, he ordered the military to open fire on civilians. The military rebelled and handed him over to the people. You can see the video here. Story 62 that happened about 15 years ago. A guy notorious drinker, the type of person that beats his wife and kids, disappeared one day. He was an unemployed bricklayer, always drunk and looking for trouble. When he got home he was either drinking or beating his wife or kids. To a point where they had broken bones. The wasn't very well educated and has been a housewife since she was 23 years old. So no education, no jobs on her resume and 2 kids to take care of, so she had no chance to get away from. She was also in this kind of acceptance state where she thought that will be the only guy who would take her. Her dad, an ex-Balkan war veteran, was in a caretaking facility around 25 or 30 minutes away from where she lived with her husband. He had cancer and was at that time around 50 years old to die in peace. She never mentioned the abuse she got and always had excuses for her injuries when she visited him. One day a caretaker was talking about the drunk wife beater during his shift and her dad instantly knew what his daughter was trying to hide. So one day he left for a walk and told the reception lady he would be back for dinner. He walked to the local pub and picked the husband up. After that the husband was never seen again. The dad was back on time for dinner. The police got involved after he was missing for a few days but couldn't find him. They just said he ran away. The town talk on the other hand thinks her dad lured him away to some free drinks if he would repair an old house roof and then killed him and buried him in the woods. But no one really knows because no one was really looking for him. Some believe he is buried near an old water well deep in the woods. She met a new guy that took care of her and the kids. The dad passed away a couple of months ago. Story 63 When I was an apprentice, a chancer parked in the training center car park, stole a laptop, expensive kit back then, and as he was leaving went the wrong way and was spotted by the 2 tutors in the workshop. They followed him outside. He drove into them, including holding on the handbrake and spinning the tires on one of the tutors, killing him. He was such a nice bloke, always a joy to talk to. The guy who did it ran off to Ireland. He was eventually caught, but by the time he was caught he was a quadriplegic in a wheelchair following a motorbike accident. Still got a prison sentence. Good. Story 64 Carl Switzer. Many accounts portray him as a real SOB. Story 65 I was pretty young and naive and a colleague took me to this mega church and the pastor was an engaging speaker in his 80s kid skateboarder gear and guitar music, and it seemed exciting, but he made my spidey sense tingle. It felt like such a cult of personality. He starts going on about how Judaism is a religion of laws and Christianity a religion of love, and it really bothered me. Jesus came to save us from this mean vengeful God who won't let they eat a ham sandwich. I look it up and that's literally his whole shtick. His book is The End of Religion on the same thesis. I write him an email that I don't think it's right of him to define his beliefs based on what he has decided others believe. My family is Jewish and he could ask Jewish people what the law means to them. Jewish people are a tiny persecuted majority, and claiming to speak for them about what they believe to his 5,000 followers every week is unfair, and what he was saying about them was even hateful. It was just an email, but it felt better to get it off my chest, and I never went back. Well, I get this foaming at the mouth furious response from himself. I've delivered this message to tens of thousands of good Christians, and no one yet except you has had a problem, so obviously you're the problem. And he made it very clear that I was just some stupid little girl who had no business daring to address this massively holy, successful, important man of God without the due respect. I was furious but didn't have any idea what to do, so I just shelved the email. But then it came out into the public that Head had multiple abusive and adulterous affairs with congregants and staff members of the church, and according to his wiki he's been defrocked. For named pastors and additional unnamed staff have been charged with misconduct, and the whole megachurch has been shut down. Story 66, not intentionally evil, but the guy who made Freon and leaded gasoline, poisoning 3 generations of people and destroying the environment, killed himself in his own handicapped Rube Goldberg contraption. Story 67, this is old news at this point, but a guy at my university was a nasty piece of work, short fuse, some minor psychopathic traits and just a really bad energy, I guess. He became a teacher and set up fake social media accounts to interact with his own students 11 to 17 and engage in behavior with them. Went to prison, never heard of since. Yo pero. Story 68, Rose West was almost able to get away with all of her horrific crimes, apparently getting her husband and serial killing partner to kill himself in prison so that he could take all the blame with him to the grave as she lied and practically forced the police into a plea deal for her to lie and make up a sob story about Fred being abusive towards her. Then it turned out that in a fit of jealousy, she murdered her stepdaughter from Fred's first marriage, right after taking the kid to visit Fred while he was in prison for a previous assault charge. The police could then prove she lied in her plea deal, and she's now serving multiple life sentences. And to further prove how she was given a whole life tariff. She's expressly banned from even entertaining the notion of parole and has been ordered to die in prison.